one behind!
A co-op shooter about space dwarves mining, drinking, and blasting aliens across diverse underground levels with a variety of explosives and other heavy weaponry is a premise that gets my beard twitching before I've even strapped a helmet on, and Deep Rock Galactic delivers on it beautifully. Aside from occasional network issues, there was rarely a moment that I wasn't having a blast with its exciting, objective-based missions and deep progression systems.
Drop departing in T-minus 2 minutes.
Deep Rock Galactic puts you in the employ of a hilariously corrupt space mining collective of the same name, and it doesn't really care if you or your dwarf buds survive your next delve into the fully deformable cavernous depths of the moon of Hoxus or not, as long as they can turn a profit. One of the various mission types even involves going in to retrieve the equipment from a team that was wiped out on a dig, so the company isn't losing more than just a few expendable lives. The jabs at corporate greed remind me of the style of humor in Fallout and the Outer Worlds, and they're always good for a chuckle.
Expect heavy infestation, and try not to mess it up like your former colleagues.
It's not all laughs once you exit the drop pod deep below the surface of Hoxus, though. In these deep, dark holes, the lack of natural lighting is an obstacle that creates both a deliciously oppressive mood and interesting resource management. Your headlamp doesn't do you a lot of good unless something is right in front of your bearded face, so you have to manage a limited supply of flares to even be able to see what you're doing. And darkness isn't the only hazard. Hoxus is brimming with freaky insectoid foes, both large and small, that don't appreciate all the racket you're kicking up. Mowing down these creepy crawly hordes is a riot, with special bug types like armored praetorians and sneaky grabbers forcing you to change up your tactics and make use of the environment to your advantage. They come at you in waves with just the right amount of breathing room after each one, striking a great tempo between moments of tense, spooky solitude and adrenaline-pumping action. It just works, in the same way that the best parts of Ridley Scott's Alien franchise do. My favorite way Deep Rock Galactic differentiates itself from other horde shooters is the movement abilities each of the 4 dwarf classes can deploy. The heavily armed gunner has a zipline launcher that can make a reusable cable bridge between 2 distant points. The engineer, in addition to being able to place powerful turrets, can spawn climbable platforms to help getting around the huge vertical arenas. The nimble scout has the most personal mobility thanks to a grappling gun, but can't help his teammates as much as the others. Your squad needs to cleverly combine these abilities to access hard-to-reach objectives and avoid getting outmaneuvered in tough fights, and it's really satisfying to find new ways to do so in the heat of the moment. Racking up a body count by itself isn't enough to come out ahead either. Each delve has a non-combat objective, from mining a certain amount of a rare ore to stealing alien eggs.
I'm totally loaded!
These create interesting tactical puzzles, since the dwarves focusing on the objectives usually can't focus on defending themselves at the same time and have to rely on their friends. It is possible to play solo, and the corporate overlords will even let you borrow a small combat drone to make it less of a chore, but Deep Rock Galactic definitely shines brightest in a 4-player group. It's a little bit unfortunate, on that note, that I didn't find the multiplayer experience to be entirely seamless. About 1 in every 5 missions or so, I had run into connection issues that could cause other players to lag severely or even disconnect, and that's never fun. The sense of camaraderie you'll develop plumbing the depths is only enhanced by the comically grimy hangout spot that is the space station you'll retire to after a mission, whether it be successful or not so successful. It's equipped with everything a dwarf could need, including a robot bartender from whom you can buy a round for the crew before kicking a few barrels into an industrial incinerator and a basketball-like minigame to blow off some steam. It feels homey and lived in, with lots of little details like interactive bobbleheads and a hall of statues and posters that you can unlock as you level up your dwarves. The progression system is extensive, allowing you to customize your dwarf both mechanically and visually. Starting off as a clean-shaven newbie, you'll have to earn your big bushy beard and a variety of other cosmetic options. Achievements like killing a certain number of bugs or completing a certain number of missions will also give you perk points that you can spend on skills like increased run speed or the ability to trigger a powerful EMP after you're knocked out by enemies. And your guns, armor, and gear can be upgraded in a multitude of ways using cold, hard cash extracted from the mines. Deep Rock Galactic is the best kind of 4-player co-op game. The combat is fast and exciting, with tons of interesting synergies to find between the 4 distinct playable classes. The objectives on the various missions are wide-ranging enough to keep things interesting, but straightforward enough that a new player could drop in and get the hang of it pretty quickly. You can absolutely have a blast and find plenty of success with a level 1 unupgraded dwarf, but there's tons of room to develop your skills and customize your look if you're willing to put in the time. Raise a tankard, this one is a winner. For more Alien action, check out our reviews of Gears Tactics and XCOM Chimera Squad. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
Okay, folks, listen up!
Good evening. Been a while, huh?
Perhaps you remember us.
We are the Phantom Thieves.
When a Persona 5 spin-off co-developed by Dynasty Warriors studio Omega Force was announced, most folk assumed it would be a Persona-skinned Muso kinda like Hyrule Warriors. In reality, Persona 5 Strikers is far closer to an action JRPG like Kingdom Hearts, doing a great job of retaining the feel of its predecessor while swapping in engaging, if simple, real-time combat. And what could have been a throwaway summer vacation filler story is actually a direct Persona 5 sequel. In fact, apart from missing a few signature systems like Confidants, if they'd called this Persona 5 2, I probably wouldn't have complained. Strikers rejoins the lovable Phantom Thieves a few months after the end of Persona 5. Just pretend Royal didn't happen, replacing turn-based combat with combo-driven hacking and slashing. You still cast Persona spells, exploit elemental weaknesses, and explore otherworldly dungeons, but other aspects, like Persona's iconic calendar system, have been cut down significantly. Instead of having control of every day over a year, Strikers is a month-long, mostly on-rails road trip across Japan. It's a great story, tying into the main games in a way that feels cleverly referential rather than derivative, and even challenging some of its ideas enough to feel like a proper sequel, at least story-wise. Given the drastic gameplay changes, it is impressive how much Strikers still looks and feels like Persona 5. And as someone who's beaten both the original and platinumed its expanded Royal Edition, it was a thrill to slip so seamlessly back into this world. But no matter how much developer Atlas tries to pitch Strikers as a standalone game accessible to newcomers, like those who might play it on PC and Switch where you still can't get Persona 5, if you jump into this blind, you'll probably be more than a little bit lost. The characters are all sharp and entertaining on their own here, including a couple of excellent new additions, but their backstories and previous events are referenced far more than they're explained. That includes everything from mentions of small character moments in Persona 5 to its finale.
Sorry about that. We just despised the police is all.
Why does that talking cat insist he's not a cat and can also turn into a bus? Strikers won't offer much context. Thankfully, Strikers combat is a lot of fun regardless. While decidedly different from a Muso's open war zones, its contained battles do share that genre's signature deluge of weak enemies to satisfyingly tear through. Tougher ones scattered amongst them require a slightly more nuanced assault, such as exploiting elemental weaknesses to stagger them for follow-ups. The combat isn't especially deep, but it's not mindlessly shallow either. You can swap between Phantom Thieves on the fly, and while mashing the attack button will string together a short combo, ending it early with the special button will cause a unique finisher depending on how many hits preceded it. For example, 3 hits first will usually trigger an AoE spell attack, while just 1 can range from Yusuke's rapid slashes to Haru chopping enemies like firewood. There's also flashy all-out and showtime attacks, the ability to pause time and cast familiar Persona spells, and more. But those 2-button fundamentals will likely be recognizable to Omega Force fans. That simplicity is wonderfully accessible, but it does mean fights can feel fairly similar as time goes on, with the main distinguishing factor being an enemy's elemental strengths and weaknesses. It's more the variety and personality of each playable character which keeps combat entertaining to the end. The endearing knucklehead Ryuji remains one of my favorites, with hard-hitting finishers that can be charged up. Compare that to Morgana, who can transform into a bus mid-fight, and each character feels mechanically distinct despite being functionally similar. As you travel around Japan, most of the metaverse dungeons you'll be fighting through transform the whole city around you. It's a cool way to spin the Persona 5 formula further, even if they aren't quite as visually unique or interesting as each palace in the last game. The pace of each infiltration is drastically different as well, with Strikers nearly always letting you come and go as you please, instead of pushing you to be as efficient with your time as possible. You do still have to be prepped with support items, particularly against bosses who almost always have about twice as much health as they need to, but generally the challenge is concentrated into bursts instead of spread out as an endurance test. Other recognizable systems have been streamlined. While the slightly simplified Velvet Room actually made managing my Persona loadout much less of a hassle, the loss of the Confidant system and the side stories that accompany them is probably the biggest way Strikers diverges from what a proper Persona 5 2 would be. Instead, you passively gain bond points by fighting, cooking, or progressing the story, which can then be spent on persistent skills like increased battle rewards. It's a fine system with skills that felt worth pursuing, but Strikers undoubtedly suffers from the lack of the more personal stories that came from just hanging out with other characters during downtime. As a result, Strikers took me about 42 hours to beat, as opposed to Persona 5's massive 100+. The main story is still great, and it never felt unduly rushed, but there's still significantly less time made for any entertaining asides. Not that every game has to keep me busy for that long, but I could spend any amount of time hanging out with the Phantom Thieves. Persona 5 Strikers' main story is every bit the direct sequel to Persona 5 that it seems, making this road trip feel essential for existing fans, but probably pretty confusing for anybody who hasn't played it. Its lack of Persona's signature social and calendar systems are the only places its spin-off status becomes a bit of a letdown, but even replacing turn-based combat with real-time action doesn't stop it from recapturing the feeling of its predecessor overall. The varied playstyles of each character and the story that pulls them along made the fairly simple act of hacking through countless shadows enjoyable to the very last surprise.
The party?
For more Persona 5, check out our review of Persona 5 Royal, or a recent Strikers trailer breaking down its characters. And for everything else, keep it right here on IGN.
PlayStation